Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, viewers, depending on where you are watching us from. It's another beautiful day right here in our studio. And as usual, Alagbafemi Odedeyi is right here on the program. Remember that the topic we've been dealing with is federalism, how far. In the past, we've spoken about different terminologies that have been used for federalism, especially in Nigeria. So we have what we call true federalism. And that becomes necessary because the federalism itself, which the country claim that is practicing or that has been practicing, people don't see it as federalism per se. So the additional adjective also had to come in for what we now call true federalism. And we've been dealing with this for many weeks. Last week, just to bring us a reminder, especially for people that are just joining us, there was a key question that we dealt with last week, and which is, should we have a regret on supporting President Ahmed Bola Tinubu to become the president of Nigeria? Our guest, Alagbafemi Odedeyi, made it known that no, we can't have regret for supporting him because, number one, it was the turn of the South, and it was the capable and viable candidate or contestant that could be put forward that has the capacity to win. There's no point putting forward someone, let's say even a technocrat or a politician, but the individual doesn't have the capacity to win. It will be just like a waste of that opportunity. So, and also we mentioned about the calls that have been made to the president about reconstituting the country. Obviously, we also mentioned about the patriot visit to the president and his response that he wants to deal with the economy first before other things. Alagbafemi Odedeyi also made us to understand that we ourselves as citizens have civic duties to actually push and ask for the reconstitution of the country. And a good example of steps that have been taken is the Yoruba Referendum bill that is currently before the 6 southwestern states houses of assembly. Other regions of the country have been asked to do likewise. They've been shown the template, but they are yet to take steps. So the key thing there was that we should not just leave it for the presidency. We are citizens that we know that if the country is reconstituted, most of the issues that we're having now, probably up to about 70 or 80%, will be resolved. And at the close of last week's session, we asked a question: should we blame the North for fighting or vying for power? Most people will shout, oh, is the North has done this, North has done that. But is it wrong for the North to continue to fight for power in a multi-ethnic or multi-nationality country like Nigeria? Let me welcome Alagbafemi Odedeyi to the program today. You are welcome, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Right. So we are picking up from last week.
Okay.
And the question is whether we should blame the North for fighting for power. Let's even say the North has just finished 8 years. And people are looking like, okay, they finished 8 years, they should just go and sit down. But the North is saying that, no, we have a right to contest. And even if we look at the political scenario just now, and I'm talking about the PDP, a faction of the PDP that had their meeting at Ibadan in the course of the week. It's not been confirmed independently, but there has been a sort of a proposal that we've seen online where Alhaji Abubakar was going to be was going to be the president, while engineer Seyi Tinubu, engineer Seyi Makinde, the current governor of Oyo State, is going to be the vice.
Candidate.
And people are looking at, I mean, why can't the North wait for the West or the South to finish its 8 years before they will also put forward a candidate from the North? And that brings us back to the question, should we blame the North for vying for power at all times?
The short answer is no. And let me explain why I said no. And also it brings into focus the necessity for Yoruba referendum, as we have said. So we have to look at the history of Nigeria itself. We don't need to go too far. By the time of the anti-colonial agitation reached its peak in the 1950s, there were two broad agitations. One led by the Action Group and Egbe Omoduduwa that we know, which was talking about federalism, and which Awolowo described, this famous expression of Awolowo that Nigeria is a mere geographical expression. Yeah, that is what they say. But why he said that was because Nigeria is a multinational country, so there cannot be a sense of abstract nationalism without taking into consideration the nationality makeup of the country. So if we have a true federal system, like say Switzerland, for example, a Yoruba can feel positively that I'm a Nigerian. Why? Because the Yoruba essence is retained. But the other side was led by Ahmadu Bello and Azikiwe, NCNC, and NPC, who are saying they don't want tribalism. Well, no, Ahmadu Bello and the NPC, they said they don't care whether that is, now we are not talking about the North. They said they don't care as long as they are in control. Whether it is federal, whether it is unitary, they don't care as long as the North is in control. The NCNC and Azikiwe and all the rest of them were against the action group by saying, no, we want a unitary system and this and that and that. They are opposed to tribalism, which they equated with federalism and all the rest of it. So everything came to a head by the January and July 1966 coups, which was essentially a grab for power by the East in January and by the North in July, both of which culminated in the war and subsequent thing. So the connection with your question is that there was a contest for power in the formation of Nigeria. The contest for power was between the North, was in triangle. So they used to talk about tripod, and this is the real tripod, not the Yoruba Wazobia tripod. It is a power tripod, where the North says they want to be on top, regardless of what happens. The West is saying, no, we must have true federalism, what we call true federalism now. And the East is saying, no, we must all have a one country and no tribalism and all the rest of it. So at the end of the day, the contest for power now united the North and the East, because it favored them that if the West is sidelined, the North will retain its power and the East will continue to say that, there's no tribalism and all the rest of it, and which has been happening since. It happened in 1959 when Azikiwe aligned with the North to retain power and became what they call ceremonial president. It happened in 1979, even after when the military were leaving and the Azikiwe and the MPP said that they are the beautiful bride, and aligned with the MPN again. So it happened even in 1983. And even during the June 12 crisis, it happened. Because the East was also against because they considered June 12 as a Yoruba affair. So is a contestation for power. So at this time, it is not surprising that the North will also want to retain power, because it's a continuation of what they have been doing, and it's a continuation of the history of Nigeria. So the fact that they now allowed what they call zoning, rotation, that after the North, it comes to South, after the South, it goes back to the North and all that. These were just mere technicalities. It does not resolve the issue of power, because if it is, let's even assume that they don't want Tinubu there, and now the report you gave, which we all read, so now a Yoruba person will now become the vice president to a Northerner. Does that make any sense? So if we are even talking about pure power calculus, why should a Yoruba person oppose a Yoruba president in order for him to become a vice president? See, so the question now is, why, while the North recognizes the centrality of what it is doing, whether they allow some things to happen or they don't allow some things to happen, that they don't want to lose power, we on our side are at best ambivalent. We don't mind to lose power as long as it serves our purpose. And the connection with the Yoruba referendum is this, that with a true federal Nigeria, there's no need to even start fighting over whether it is the turn of the North or it is the turn of the South or anywhere, because residual power for development and human capacity will rest with the people themselves, will rest with the nationalities. So we can now start fighting among ourselves. So who is going to lead Yoruba land? Is it from here or there? And then we can start fighting along that side. But because the residual power, what I mean by residual power, is not a question of what they call devolution, where the federal government will say, okay, these are your powers. You can go this far. You can't go that far. Residual power means we can go anywhere we want to go, including what we surrender to the center. That is the meaning of federalism. So the residual power to develop ourselves according to our language, according to our culture, according to our worldview,
yes,
will rest with us. And any other nationality, we are just using the Yoruba as an example. So that is the cure for all these brouhaha that they are talking about. So if we have that, we are the ones to decide what we surrender to the center. So if we surrender 1 out of 10 items, let anybody go to the center now. That's what we surrender. We can also take back if we want to, if it's necessary. So that is the essence of residual power. You give something out, you also have the right to take it back if it's not working out for you. So that is why we are saying the essence of what we are agitating for when we say Yoruba referendum is to regain that residual power. And that residual power, even in the Constitution, the 1999 Constitution, where it says states are the federating units, they have already taken away your capacity for residual power, because we are not states. We are a human society. We are human beings. We are organized in our territory. So we should be able to define what happens within that territory. So with that, we are to connect with the advent of Nigeria as an independent country and the whole process of power mongering. We recognize that, yes, the whole essence of independence was to take power away from the colonial power, which was Britain. That's why we call them colonial powers, Abi.
yes.
So we take power away from them. So the question now is, where does that power reside within us? So if the North keeps saying, we want power, we want power, we want power, yes now. So it is now left for us to say, we are not saying the North should not get power. We are only saying get power over your own territory. You can't have the power over us. So the question really should be on us, whether we also want power or we don't want power. So now that if it is true again, someone now says, okay, let's get rid of a Yoruba person as president. Whether good or whether he's doing anything good or bad, let's get rid of him so that I can become vice president. It doesn't make any sense. And I mean, at the risk of saying one is campaigning for Tinubu, if that is the case, for the so-called opposition, the Yoruba should simply outrightly reject it. Because if we don't, we are reinforcing the northern concept of power. So, and if we keep blaming the North, Fulani this, Fulani that, Igba Shigba, Awushawu, and one of our own is saying that let us subvert the president who is one of our own so that I can become the deputy to the Northerner. It's an indictment. Let me put it that way, if it is true. If he has positioned himself, look here, it is the South turn, 8 years for the turn. So Tinubu has done his 4 years. Let me do my 4 years. We can start talking about that. But if they are now saying they want to deputize the North, that is even an insult on Yoruba people, I'm sorry to say. So, in a nutshell, yes, the North is, I mean, like I said, anti-colonialism or decolonization is a power equation. You take power from those that are using it to oppress you. So if the North says they want to be perpetually in power, yes, they can be perpetually in power in their own territory, but they can't be perpetually in power in a federal system. So because there is no federal system, that is why it has become problematic. So the answer to it is to restore that federalism so that whoever becomes president in 2027 won't come back to 2031 and start saying, is it the turn of the North or the South? This and that. So if Atiku wins, another Northerner will come in and say, yes, we have to spend 8 years, I can contest. And then you find another Yoruba or Igbo saying, yes, now let me be vice president. So that question of power is more for the Yoruba, or let me say the South, or the non-Fulani, yes, to address rather than the North. We can't moralize it because colonialism or slavery or whatever are not moral issues. They are issues of power. And those who are capable of addressing the issue of power must encourage themselves to do so. So that's why we say the Yoruba referendum is our route to taking that power. I don't know whether I answered your question.
You covered it, and I think there's a point you made there that the North has the right to fight for power, or even to fight for perpetual power.
Yes.
But it's for the others. It's for the others who are also involved to be able to say, no, this power, you can't have the power. Or if they agree to a sort of a sharing ratio, to say that, okay, this is how we are going to share it. That it goes beyond people just shouting, oh, they not just want to be in power, they don't just want to be in power. That the people from the South has to take active and proactive steps to checkmate that. One other point that you made now also is about the moral issue. The contestation for power is not like a game of chess where somebody will say, okay, you play once, Then after you play, then I will play once again, then it's now your turn. When it comes to power, it actually depends on how you can tackle or fight or negotiate for the power. So the onus actually lies on the people that are not northerners, non-northerners, to be able to take practice step to checkmate the power that the North always wants to retain, if we put it like that. Some people have said that before the colonial masters left, there are a couple of events that took place which made the North to believe that it should be in control at all time. I'm going to mention two instances, and you please clarify it for us. There have been, from record or from history or from what we've had, there have been two different times that the North actually planned to leave Nigeria. And it was claimed that they were advised by the colonial masters to stay within Nigeria. Is this something you've had before too, sir?
Yes. Well, the first time, the major one that everyone can vouch for was on July 29, 1966, when they had the counter coup. And the first statement that came out from Gowon was that the basis for Nigeria's unity no longer exists. And the entire northern military establishment at that time was talking about Araba, which means secession. So the British intervened and ensured that they retained control, because according to them, if they seceded at that time, if they secede, they will become landlocked. And we in the South will make we make their eyes see pepper. So before then, I think in 1959, when they had the federal elections to control the center, because of the census that was manipulated at that time, it gave them the largest number of seats, that is, gave the North, so that when they have the election, if they won all the seats at that time, they will become, in a parliamentary system, they will become the government. But unfortunately for them, they didn't win the majority. So they had to get into an alliance with the East, like I said earlier, to form the government at that time. But all along, Ahmadu Bello had been insistent that the only way they can remain in Nigeria is to have control over Nigeria. He did not mince any words about it. He did not hide it, and the MPC did not hide it. So now, when apparently by 1966, they weren't thinking about being landlocked. It was just an emotional outburst. So the British advised them to do so. Okay, like we said earlier, power is not an emotional roller coaster. It's a calculated move. You calculate based on your interests. So when they told them in 1966 not to leave, but to retain in control, what did Gowon do? Gowon released Awu from jail. Immediately, he took, I think August 1 or 4, 1966, he released Awu from jail. Meanwhile, Ironsi, that had been in power, that was killed in July 29, did not release him. Now, what kind of calculation do you expect? Do you now expect Awolowo to now go against Gowon, that released him from an unjustifiable jail, or what? So when they started all these things and all these things started happening, by the time of the war and even at the end of the war, Awolowo made it clear that he will not be part of a military government after the war, that he would prefer a democratic this and that, and restated his belief in federalism. So while the British colonial power reinforced the northern quest for continuous power, we, on the other hand, were still, let me say, not divided, but still fighting our battles individually. Because at the time Awolowo was after the war, and Awolowo and Gowon reneged on his thing to leave government, and then Awolowo resigned. Now, you would think that the East would have learned their lessons in 1959, 1964, and even the coup itself, to have teamed up with Awo at that time. Because if they had done that, number one, probably the 1975 Mohammed coup will not happen. Number two, you remember it was Rotimi Williams. I mentioned it deliberately. Rotimi Williams and Ben Nwabueze that were the leaders of the CDC, which brought about the presidential system that Obasanjo imposed. Now, who are these people? We all know Rotimi Dilo as Rotimi Dilo, but he was the first Attorney General of Western Region under the Action Group, who resigned based on certain ideological differences. We don't need to go into that now. Who was Ben Nwabueze? Ben Nwabueze was the guy who drafted the abolition decree of 1966 for Ironsi. And now they came together to including the Bala Usman, all the so-called Marxists at that time. They now, all because their thing was that they wanted to dissuade Nigeria from quote-unquote tribalism, because they also saw federalism as a tribalistic issue, not as a nationality issue. So they did that. They created the federal system. And you remember initially Awolowo even said he would not participate in that 1979 elections. But he had to do so to make sure that the action group area of influence was retained. That was why we had what they call the Lobo states at that time, Lagos, Oyo, Ogun, Bendel, and LOBO states at that time, which was retained. So now the same Rotimi Williams and Ben Nwabueze now created the group we now know as the Patriots. Why? Because they saw the failure of their earlier attempts at centralized federalism, which must be corrected. And that's why they are still at it today. So it is true. Like I said, the British did their own, and they will continue to do it to retain, because they have an interest to retain. So the question now is, do we keep blaming them for retaining their interest? Or do we sit back and say, okay, how do we reclaim our own interests? Because if we don't do that, they will continue doing what they are doing, and they will continue in power. So that is why the whole question of federalism and the Yoruba referendum and all the rest of it becomes crucial. That's why we call on people, look, this is our own struggle. It's not a question of whether we like Tinubu or we don't like Tinubu, or whoever becomes president. It is an existential issue for us. We have to face this question of power in its right dimension. And the only way we can do that is when we have a proper federal system. So I think we should go beyond this question of, the British did this, the Fulani are doing that, and they are killing us, they are doing that. It is because they wanted to, if they don't remove you from their area of control, they won't be able to control you. So they have to remove you. So to prevent your removal, you have to organize your own resistance. And you cannot, how do you put it? You cannot shunt that responsibility away. You can't trade it away. That's why we are saying it is now our responsibility to take care of our future.
Yeah, thank you, Alagba Femi Fadi, Alagba Femi Odediyi.
Yes.
And in Yoruba, they will say, Panso Fura, Pansajana Ajo Fura Ajaji. They will say, Bi onile ò bá fura, olè ní ò kó lọ. And it's just talking about us being conscious of what is happening around us. With that question about the North, I think the next topic we'll be dealing with next week is going to be Yoruba liberalism, if I can call it like that. Just to see that are we too liberal to the point that we are damaging ourselves. But just to round off for the one we are talking on today, in terms of the North fighting for power, could we say the North has sustained power from that time, the 1960s, up to the moment?
Yes, they have. Unfortunately, it also delves into the question you said we will deal with next week. Now, how did they do it? They didn't do it because they have superior knowledge, or because Britain supported them, or because of this and that. They did it because we acquiesced in their doing it. And we'll give examples. How did Abuja come into being? It was Justice Akinola Aguda and Taisho Larin who were tasked with the responsibility of creating a so-called central this and that, and then they created Abuja. Justice Akinola Aguda apologized before he died, though, saying that they didn't know. Okay. When Babangida took over and began calling his so-called economic policies, who was in charge? Professor Jetunji Aboyade, who was a professor of economics. We have mentioned Obasanjo earlier with Rotimi Williams and Ben Nwabueze. Okay, so when Abacha did his own, even then, before Abacha did his own, who was the main opponent? Who was Awo's main opponent? MKO, the June 12th symbol, MKO at that time, although he also recanted though, later. So when Abacha did his own, who are the main, we all remember Ebinotopsy now. No one who is involved in Yoruba politics will not remember Ebinotopsy. So, all true, such that by 1999, when the Yoruba struggle via Nadeco actually had the Nigerian state by the jugular, when we should have insisted that no, we must have a federal constitution before any other thing. The Yoruba leaders at that time also said, no, let's get there first. Now, that is their concept of getting power. That is, they did not create the conditions for their getting to power, and they expected those who created the conditions to allow them to get to power and use it for their own good. So it's like when we said Britain supported the North to sustain power, we now go to Britain and say, yeah, support us to get to power. Because British interest is in getting the North to continue to be in power. So if we go to them to say, support us to get into power, they will want us to become subservient to their own agenda. So unless we create our own agenda, we are not even going to get into power. So in 1999, that was what happened. They say, oh, no, leave them alone. They will do this, they will do that. Let's get to power first. And when they got to power, they started fighting among each other. Why? Because there was no template for power. So that's why, because of time, so that's why I said the question is related to what you said we will deal with next week. That it is, do we really understand the nature of power?
Excellent.
In the context of federalism, or in the context of decolonization, or in the context of emancipation? That is the crucial issue. And that is where I believe we should now start addressing ourselves, because all the forces in Yoruba land, that have been involved in one way or the other with questions of power are now lying prostrate. Afenifere ni o. I don't even know whether Yoruba Council of Elders still exists. The Yoruba Self-Determination, Yoruba Nation now, we don't know what they are doing. So everything is just prostrate. So to really revive it, we need a template for power. And at the risk of repeating myself, the Yoruba referendum is the foundation for that template. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Alagba Femi Odedeyi. Our time is fast spent. Our viewers, please join us next week. And the question is, which you can also contribute to, is Yoruba too liberal in terms of power contestation within Nigeria? Do have a wonderful week, and we will see you next week.